Have you ever wondered if your children love you for who you are or for what you have in your bank account? It is a heavy thought that most parents try to push away because it hurts too much to think about. But before we get to that, do us one quick favor. Subscribe, hit the like button while you're at it, and comment where you're listening from so we can see how far these stories are reaching. My name is Thomas, and I spent 40 years building a legacy only to realize my children were already measuring the curtains before I was even gone. I remember the early days better than I remember yesterday. My wife, Mary, and I started with nothing but a used truck and a lot of hope. We opened our first diner in a small brick building that used to be a pharmacy. I flipped the burgers and she waited the tables. We worked 16 hours a day and slept on a mattress in the tiny office in the back. We were tired all the time, but we were happy because we were building something together. Eventually, that one diner became 2. Then it became 4. We called them Mary's Kitchen because she was the heart of everything we did. By the time our children were in high school, we weren't just restaurant owners. We had bought 2 apartment complexes on the edge of town. I also had the foresight to buy 300 acres of scrubland out west when everyone thought it was worthless. I just liked the way the sun looked hitting the hills out there. Then the oil companies started calling. They circled that land like sharks in a feeding frenzy. They knew what was under that dirt long before I did. The offers stayed in the millions, and suddenly, I was a very wealthy man. But wealth does strange things to people. Mary and I stayed the same. We still drove the same old truck and ate at our own diners. Our children, James and Catherine, were different. They grew up with the money, and they grew to expect it. When Mary passed away 3 years ago, my world stopped. I felt like half of my soul had been ripped out. I sat in our living room for weeks, just staring at her empty chair. I expected my children to sit with me and mourn their mother. Instead, they started looking at the books. James is a corporate consultant, or so he says. He wears suits that cost more than my first car. Catherine is married to a man who spends his days at the country club. Neither of them ever put in a day of hard labor in their lives. The funeral wasn't even over before James pulled me aside. We were standing by the gravesite, and the dirt was still fresh. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He asked if I had a copy of the updated deed for the apartment complexes. He told me he wanted to optimize the cash flow. He said I was too emotional to handle the business side of things right now. I looked at him and saw a stranger. I saw a man who saw his mother's death as a business opportunity. Catherine was no better. A week later, she came over to the house. She didn't bring food or offer to clean. She started putting little colored stickers on the bottom of Mary's antique vases and furniture. She said she wanted to make sure the assets were accounted for. "Dad, you're not good with money anymore," they told me at lunch a month later. They said it in unison, like they had practiced it in the car. "The world is changing. Let us help you manage the estate. We don't want you to be stressed." They didn't want to help me. They wanted to take from me. They thought I was old and confused. They thought the grief had made my brain soft. They treated me like a child who couldn't be trusted with his own wallet. I watched them for 3 years. I played the part of the lonely, aging father. I let them take me to dinners where they spent the whole time talking about asset allocation and diversified portfolios. They stopped asking about my health. They stopped asking about my day. They only talked about the land out west. They wanted me to sell it to the highest bidder and put the money in a trust they could control. James even brought a lawyer to my house one Tuesday afternoon without telling me. The lawyer was a young man in a shiny suit. He looked at me with pity. He had a stack of papers that would give James and Catherine power of attorney. They told me it was for my own protection. They said it would make things easier when I inevitably couldn't handle things. I didn't sign the papers. I told them I needed to think about it. James got frustrated and raised his voice. He told me I was being stubborn. Catherine started to cry, but I could tell the tears were fake. She was a good actress, but I knew her better than she knew herself. That was the night I decided to visit my old friend, Robert. Robert has been my lawyer since I bought my first grill. He is honest, and he knows the value of $1. We sat in his office for 4 hours that night. "Are you sure about this, Thomas?" Robert asked me. He looked over the documents we were drafting. He knew my children, too. He had seen them grow up. "I have never been more sure of anything," I told him. "They think I'm a bank. They forgot I'm their father. They need to learn that you don't get what you haven't earned." For the next 3 years, I lived a double life. I let James and Catherine believe they were winning. I let them handle some of the smaller details of the apartment rentals. I listened to their lectures about how I was wasting money by keeping the restaurants open. They wanted to fire the staff. Some of those people had been with me for 20 years. They were family, but James saw them as overhead. He wanted to turn the diners into high-end bistros or sell the land to developers. "The margins are too low, Dad," he would say. "You're living in the past." I would just nod and sip my coffee. I would tell him he was probably right. I would let him feel smart. It is amazing how much people will tell you when they think you are beneath them. Last Thursday, I decided it was time. I invited both of them to the house for a formal dinner. I told them we needed to have a serious talk about the future of the estate. They were excited. I could hear the greed in their voices over the phone. They arrived at the house at exactly 6 o'clock. James was wearing a new watch that probably cost $40,000. Catherine had a brand new designer handbag. They looked like they were going to a gala, not their father's house. I had cooked the meal myself. It was Mary's favorite, roast beef with potatoes and carrots. I set the table with the good china. The same china Catherine had already marked with a sticker 3 years ago. For the first hour, I didn't say much. I let them talk. It was a mistake on my part to think they would show any restraint. They argued openly about who would get the west tract of land. They argued about which apartment complex was more valuable. "The west land should be split 50-50, James said, pointing a fork at his sister. "But I should manage the sale because I have the connections." "No way," Catherine snapped. "You'll take a bigger cut for management fees. I want my half in a separate account immediately." They spoke as if I wasn't even sitting at the head of the table. I was a ghost in my own dining room. I watched the steam rise from my coffee and waited. I felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. Finally, James looked at me. He had a smug smile on his face. "So, Dad, have you made up your mind? Are you ready to let us take over the heavy lifting?" "I've made a lot of decisions lately," I said quietly. I reached down to the floor and picked up a manila envelope. I slid it across the mahogany table. It hit James's wine glass with a soft clink. "I updated my will," I said. "I thought you should see it. Read page 4. That's the important part." James chuckled. "It's about time. Don't worry, we'll make sure you're taken care of. We found a really nice facility. Near the coast. It's like a resort." He opened the envelope. Catherine leaned in close, her eyes wide. They were hunting for numbers. They were looking for the millions they thought were coming their way. I watched James's face carefully. It went from smug to confused. Then it went completely blank. His skin turned a pale, sickly color. It was the color of a man who had just seen his entire future disappear. Catherine's hand started shaking. She grabbed the paper from her brother. Her eyes raced down the lines of text. The room went very quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. "What is this?" James whispered. His voice was thin and weak. "This says the assets are being moved into a series of irrevocable trusts." "That's right," I said. I took a bite of my roast beef. It was perfectly cooked. The restaurants, the apartments, and the land. Everything. But who are the beneficiaries? Catherine asked. She was gasping for air like she had been punched in the stomach. "It says we are excluded. It says we receive nothing. Every dollar goes to your children, I said. My grandchildren. The trusts are set up to pay for their education, their health care, and a modest home when they turn 30. They cannot touch the principal until they are 50 years old. You can't do this, James whispered. He slammed his hand on the table. The glasses rattled. We are your children. We've spent years helping you. Helping yourselves, you mean? I said. My voice was calm and steady. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt finished. You haven't helped me with anything. You've treated me like a carcass you were waiting to pick clean. Dad, you're not thinking straight, Catherine said. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it away. This is a mistake. You're being spiteful. Look at the date on the last page, I told them. James flipped the pages with trembling fingers. He found the signature line. His eyes widened. 3 years ago? This was dated 3 years ago. 2 weeks after your mother's funeral, I said. I saw the way you looked at her things. I heard James asking about the deeds while the priest was still speaking. I knew then who you had become. The realization hit them both at the same moment. All those years of pretending to care. All those dinners where they played the part of the concerned children. It had all been for nothing. I had already made the decision before they even started their act. I've been planning this since the day their mother passed, I said. Some lessons take time to teach. I wanted to see if either of you would change. I wanted to see if you would ever just come over to see how I was doing, without mentioning the money. You let us believe. James started, his face turning red with anger. You lied to us. You let us waste our time. You wasted your own time, James, I replied. If you had spent half as much time working as you did plotting to take my money, you wouldn't need a trust fund anyway. We'll fight this, Catherine hissed. She wasn't crying anymore. The mask was completely off. Her face was full of pure greed and hatred. We'll prove you weren't in your right mind. Good luck, I said. I had a full psychiatric evaluation the morning I signed that will. Robert has the video of the session. I'm perfectly sane. I just happened to be disappointed. James stood up so fast his chair fell backward. He didn't bother to pick it up. He looked at me with a look of utter contempt. You're a selfish old man. You're going to die alone in this house. I might, I said, but I'll die knowing that the money Mary and I worked for will actually help the next generation. It won't be spent on your watches or your country club fees. It will build lives, not egos. They didn't stay for dessert. They didn't even say goodbye. They stormed out of the house, leaving the front door wide open. I sat there in the silence for a long time. The house felt bigger than it used to. I got up and closed the door. I locked it. Then I went back to the kitchen and started cleaning the dishes. I liked the feeling of the warm water on my hands. It reminded me of the old days in the diner. A few days later, my phone rang. It was my granddaughter, Sophie. She is James's daughter. She is 19 and in her second year of college. She is a hard worker, just like her grandmother was. She works a part-time job at the campus library. Grandpa, she said. She was crying. What's wrong, Sophie? I asked. I just got a call from a lawyer, she sobbed. He said my tuition is paid for. He said there's a fund for my grad school, too. He said I don't have to worry about money ever again. The fund hit 7 figures this morning, Sophie, I told her. The oil company finally signed the lease on the Westland. That money belongs to you and your cousins. Grandpa, I don't know what to say, she said. I was so stressed about my student loans. I didn't want to ask Dad because he's always talking about how tight things are. Save the tears, honey, I said, smiling for the first time in a week. There's plenty more where that came from. Your grandmother and I wanted you to have a chance to do something great without the weight of debt on your shoulders. Thank you, Grandpa. Can I come over this weekend? I want to bring you some of those cookies you like. I'd like that very much, I said. She didn't mention her father. I didn't mention him either. James and Catherine haven't called me since that dinner. I don't expect them to. They are busy talking to lawyers trying to find a loophole that doesn't exist. They don't understand that the money was never the point. The point was the work. Mary and I didn't build an empire because we wanted to be rich. We built it because we wanted to create something together. We wanted to provide for our family. James and Catherine thought the finish line was the prize. They didn't realize. The prize was the race itself. They wanted the fruit without ever planting the tree. I still go down to one of the diners every morning. I sit in the back booth and have a cup of black coffee. The regulars still call me by my name. The waitresses know I like my eggs over easy. Sometimes I look at the young couples sitting at the counter. I see them counting their change to see if they can afford a slice of pie. I remember being them. I remember the hunger and the hope. I sometimes send an anonymous pie to their table. I tell the waitress not to say who it's from. It's a small thing, but it makes me feel like Mary is still here. My children think they lost everything that night at the dining room table. They are wrong. They never had it to begin with. You can't lose something you never truly owned. They had my love, and they threw it away for the promise of gold. They had my respect, and they traded it for a sense of entitlement. Those are the things they should be mourning, not the bank accounts. I am 80 years old now. My bones ache when it rains, and my hair is long gone. But my mind is sharp, and my conscience is clear. I have protected my wife's legacy. I have ensured that our grandkids will have the opportunities their parents squandered. Last night, I walked out to the backyard. I looked up at the stars. It was a clear night, the kind where you can see forever. I felt a sense of peace I haven't felt since Mary died. I did the right thing. It wasn't the easy thing, and it wasn't the kind thing. But it was the right thing. Some lessons are hard. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn. When Sophie came over that weekend, she didn't bring a lawyer. She brought a batch of homemade chocolate chip cookies. They were a little burnt on the bottom, just the way I like them. We sat on the porch and talked for hours. We didn't talk about trusts. We didn't talk about oil leases or apartment complexes. We talked about her classes. We talked about her dreams of becoming a doctor. We talked about her grandmother. I miss her, Sophie said, looking out at the yard. Me too, I said. But she'd be proud of you. She always said you had her eyes. As I watched her leave that evening, I realized I wasn't alone. I have my memories. I have my grandkids. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that I am more than just a line item on a balance sheet. James and Catherine might never forgive me. They might spend the rest of their lives bitter and angry. That is their choice. I gave them everything they needed to be successful people, but I couldn't give them a heart. They had to find that on their own. I walked back into my quiet house. I turned off the lights. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom Mary and I shared for 40 years. I slept soundly, knowing that the work was done. The oil will keep pumping. The diners will keep serving breakfast. The apartments will keep providing homes for people. And the money will be there, waiting for the children who are actually willing to value it. I am just an old man who flipped burgers and bought some dirt. But I am an old man who knows the difference between a price and a value. And that is something my children will never understand. If this story resonated with you, join our channel by liking and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.